Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Walter Jon Williams. Walter was a historical fiction author, and he is now a speculative fiction author. I guess you could say he was writing books about the past, and now he's writing books about the future. Um, but
Well, they take a lot of the same skills, actually. So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I would say so. But you write so many, your books are so diverse.
Mhm.
So I was just wondering if you could explain to people what it is that you write.
Okay.
Now,
Well, you were right in saying that they are all over the map.
hmm
Um, I, First of all, one of my primary purposes is not to bore myself with my own writing, and to that end, I don't want to do the same book over and over and over. It's just not in me. And so I try to do a lot of change ups and take contrary positions on this and that, just to maintain interest. Not just my interest, but I hope the interests of the reader. So, if you're not familiar with my work and you decide to pick something up, and then decide to pick something else up, be aware that the next one might be quite different.
okay, that sounds really good. So, what do you think draws readers to your latest book? What can you tell us a little bit about your latest book?
My latest book, well, it's in the series that you see behind me
Yep,
here, which was originally called Dread Empire's Fall, and now it's called The Books of the Praxis.
right.
And what they are is on the one hand, it's space opera, verging on military science fiction. On the other hand, it's satire and social comedy. And on the third hand, it's a comment on imperialism and how it works. So it's quite a mishmash of stuff, and it's also whatever I'm interested in that week. So um, and it is plotted out the series with a long arc of 11 or 12 books, and so far six have been published.
Wow.
Um, and the latest one, uh, uh, Imperium Restored, is the
Right.
actually it that makes a nice conclusion. So you won't be left hanging if you just read the first six and the two novellas. Um, it does come to a really nice conclusion, and then I can pick it up again whenever I decide I'm not bored to do it.
Okay, do you often like go from one series and then write for a different series and then go back to another series? Is that how you
Uh,
work?
yeah, the first last few years I've been doing exactly that. I had two different series with two different publishers, and they were very kind enough to let me alternate books. So I'd write one
Mm.
Praxis book, then I'd write a Quillifer book, then I'd write a Praxis book, then I'd write a Quillifer book. And those contracts have expired, and we await future developments. So, um, but also the Praxis books are very different from the Quillifer books, which are high fantasy
hmm
of a particular type. I have been inspired in fantasy by a lot of the classic fantasy writers, a lot of the pre-Tolkien writers, like E.R. Edison, um, and and I think they contributed a lot to this genre that has been sort of forgotten. And so I'm trying, not to bring back their kind of writing, which is, not possible in today's commercial market. But to just kind of give a flavor of that because it's so old, it's new.
Hmm. Interesting thought. Um, so are those your newer books, or is
Yeah,
that a
they've come out in
continuation
the
of
last
your?
2 years. The first three Quillifer books,
Cool. Yeah. Okay.
first three of a series
Quillifer.
of six. Again, it's been strongly plotted out over many books, because I'm nothing if not a plotter. To give an example of how that works, I knew the last line of the third Praxis book before I wrote the first line of the first Praxis book. And this
Wow.
is so that I could build the entire arc so that it lands on that last sentence.
Wow. Okay.
So sometimes you will encounter in my book something that seems not exactly pertinent to the
Hmm.
rest of the book, and that's maybe because I'm setting up something 3 books farther down the line.
Okay. So you definitely are an outliner, right?
Oh yeah, I'm a plotter. Which is not
Right.
to say I don't allow myself spontaneity. I mean, if I'm writing along and I think of something really cool to do, I will do that, whether it's in the outline
Okay.
or not. But yeah, I like to know where I'm going.
Interesting. So when you start a series, I mean, when you start a book, you already know it's going to be a 6 book series or a 2 book series or a 3 book series.
Well, most of my books are singletons; they're not series at all. But yes, I plot them out that far. The Praxis books were plotted out to 11 or 12 books, and after that, I go to the next generation. If I continue the series, I will have exhausted my original cast.
Wow. Okay. Um, so for you want to talk about the Imperium Restored, correct?
Sure, happy to.
Okay. Okay. What was the inspiration actually for the Praxis series?
Well, now you're asking me to think back 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been going actually over 20 years. I sold it in the first year or two of this century, and then the original 3 books didn't sell all that well, so yeah, they told me goodbye, have fun, and then the books kept on selling. They
Ah.
never fell out of print. They went through multiple printings. I don't know. I think the first one, the Praxis, is up to, I don't know, 13, 14 printings by now. And they just kept selling. And 10 years in, somebody looked at this and said, these books are selling really well. Maybe we should get more of them. Um,
Hmm.
and so there's quite a gap there. I had really said goodbye to this series and these characters. But what I wanted to do was write a space opera. There are certain things that are common to a lot of my work. A
Hmm.
lot of them are about class, money, and crime.
Hmm.
And in the case of the Praxis, the crime is that this huge, shambling, vicious space empire that has been built by aliens. It's not a human empire. The humans were conquered by these aliens early on. And the ones who prospered were those who collaborated with the conquerors. So you have an upper crust that are essentially collaborators with everybody else being squashed down below.
Hmm.
And what happens in the first book is the last of the alien conquerors dies.
Hmm.
And what you have are a ruling class that is used to taking orders, and those orders aren't coming anymore, and they have to do it on their own. And they're not used to that, and bad things result.
Hmm. Okay. But what actually did give you the inspiration for that?
Um, I think part of it was history.
Ah.
People have okay. I can't remember who said it, um, but one of my great ancestral inspirational writers, whose name I cannot remember at this instant, said that the secret weapon in science fiction is history,
Mm.
because people who like science fiction also tend to like history, and they can start drawing parallels between their future worlds and the past. So a lot of it has to do with imperial history, the British Empire, the Roman Empire, any empire you can name, and dealing with the consequences of conquest by a superior force, um, and how you collaborate with that. I suspect that John W. Campbell is spinning in his grave at the very thought, because Campbell, one of the great editors in our field, insisted that humanity was the biggest, roughest, toughest species in the entire galaxy, and there's no way we would ever lose a fight with anyone ever, ever, ever. And so I opened with, not only have we been conquered, but we've been sort of lying passively in this hideous, oppressive situation for hundreds and hundreds of years because we have no choice, basically.
Hmm. Okay. Um, did you have to do, well, you mentioned history, so you must have had to do a lot of research in these
The
books.
research that I needed to do for this series was mainly in science because I needed to get the science right for how wormholes work and how spaceships work and how the various astronomical things work. And I initially made a terrible mistake, which is that I used um, as one of my sources an astronomy text that was 10 years old. And in those 10 years, the universe had completely changed.
Yep.
And a lot of this stuff no longer applied. So in there's the author's preferred edition out now of all of these books, or all of the early ones, in which I went back and fixed all that.
Okay.
So there are ways in which your research can totally lead you astray, and it's happened to me a number of times. And I'm like,
Really?
but it was a textbook, no.
Yeah, but it was 50 years old.
Yeah, only 10, only 10. I knew better than to use a 50-year-old textbook.
Okay. So what was your favorite research story for all of your books? All of
Mm.
your,
Well, a lot of it has to do with the Quillifer books, the high fantasy series that
okay.
I mentioned, because it's set in a kind of analog of the Northern European Renaissance. And
Yep.
just the historical stuff that I was coming up with in researching that was amazing. For instance, did you know that King Arthur's court, complete with the round table, is in Gdansk, Poland?
I hadn't heard that until
I was
I
actually
read your
walking in Gdansk, and there was this big, high Gothic, white, scallopy building full of, Gothic frou-frou. And I walked in, and there was a round table, and there were all these massive chairs around it, and each of the chairs had a coat of arms. And I was told this is King Arthur's court. I bet you thought King Arthur was British. Well, you're wrong.
Are they just saying that or
Well, what it turns out that these were a bunch of rich merchants, and they liked to dress up and play knights. And so they would get together in their little private club and they'd reenact the Knights of the Round Table, and they'd have entertainments and feasts and jousts and all that kind of stuff. And the thing that just astounded me was that they were cosplaying the Middle Ages in the Middle Ages.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And
Wow.
also all of the technology that we had that we don't think they had. Um, Actually, in the Middle Ages, they invented blast furnaces, for example,
Huh.
and windmills, and various other industrial processes. And at the same time, there were these things called turnspit dogs. Ever heard of a turnspit dog?
No.
Okay, all of the cooking was over open hearth furnaces, right? Because they hadn't really perfected stoves. And so you had your protein on the spit, and it had to be turned, otherwise it'd burn. And you could get some servant to do that, but they were unreliable. So there was a species of dog called turnspit dogs, now extinct. And these dogs would sit in basically a large hamster wheel and just trot along. And there would be a belt system, belt and pulley system that would turn the spit as
Wow.
these dogs ran along. And each dog would have like a 2-hour shift before it would get too hot because it was in a hot kitchen. And they'd have to bring in a new one. It was a lousy life for this dog. And then on Sundays, they would take their dogs to church and they would be foot warmers for the ladies.
Wow. Things you find out when you do research.
Yes. And I've certainly never seen
Interesting.
any of this in fiction, but now it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out Imperium Restored?
It's not to repeat myself too closely. because
Okay.
I really don't want to write the same book over and over again. And with this last book, Imperium Restored, I was really worried about that because the previous book had taken place entirely in artificial environments, in space stations, on spaceships. So there, people were wandering down corridors and staying in small cabins on their bunks or whatever. And they never got a breath of fresh air. They were confined in these small areas all the time. And the second book starts that way. And this goes on for months and months of book time. And
Hmm.
so I had to keep finding out things for them to do. And I think
Hmm.
I was pretty successful because I was able to relate all the stuff that they were doing with the main story. Um, and I didn't know whether I'd succeeded until I went back and read it all after I'd finished. And then went,
Hmm.
oh boy, okay, this is not Fleet Elements all over again. This has a lot more going on.
Okay. So your challenge was actually to not repeat yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Um, was there any character that you really loved or hated
Oh,
in the
well,
book?
um, I tend not to have, strong emotions towards my characters because I just think of them as little puppets that I move across a stage, that
Hmm.
because I'm a plotter. I know where they're going. I know what they're going to do and I know what they're thinking. But the ones that the reader really loves are
Hmm.
Lady Sula, who
Okay.
is on the one hand, she's a super aristocrat. She's really beautiful. She's incredibly talented and ambitious. And on the other hand, she's an imposter. She's someone from the lowest orders of society who has stepped into the place of this aristocrat and done it when they were very young, when they were teenagers. And if anyone finds out, she's dead. Merely impersonating this person is a capital crime, let alone anything else that she does. So she is continually caught in, dare I trust this person? Dare I love this person? What happens if I make a misstep? What happens if the person I love finds out that I'm not who he thinks I am?
Mm.
And because I wanted to have, if I'm going to create a society this big and complicated, I want to explore all elements of it. So she's a slum kid, and we get to see that. And she's an aristocrat, and we get to see that.
Mm. So do you put any of yourself in any of your characters?
Oh, probably I put myself in all of them, but I don't do it deliberately. I don't think I'm interesting enough to be a person in fiction. I mean, really, I spent my life sitting at a keyboard punching keys. And though I do give myself a really good vacation now and again, I don't think my life has been sufficiently dramatic
Okay.
to serve as a template for a fictional character.
Okay. So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Okay, well, I'm doing something that's very exciting, actually, because back in the 90s, I had a series running called Metropolitan. I only wanted to write one book, and I had it very carefully outlined. And like 2 seconds in, this book totally went out of control, and my outline wasn't happening. It wasn't helping. And so the first book ended up being the 2 paragraphs of my outline. And then I said, okay, I'll end it here and I'll finish the book in another volume. And then I wrote City on Fire, which got me halfway through the original outline. And then my editor was fired. His fiction line was canceled. I never got to complete the series. And nobody else wanted to buy a book that was the third book in someone else's, another publisher's series. And those books were very well received. They both got Nebula nominations. One got a Hugo nomination. And I think if I'm remembered for anything, it'll probably be the Metropolitan series. So now I am writing that third book.
Ah,
And it was out of control from about the second sentence. But I'm familiar with how this works now with this particular series, and I'm confident that it will, end up after a whole lot of hair pulling and anguish, being a good book.
And the
And
fourth one?
I don't know if I have a market for it. I don't know if anyone's going to want this series. But hey, we have options now. I can sell it myself.
Right, right,
Yeah.
you could. Yeah. And the fourth book in that series is going to be
It better not be. I'm winding it up with this volume one way or another, even if it's 1,500 pages long. I'm finishing it now.
okay. Now I have questions for you about being a writer.
Okay,
What is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
finishing a book. You know,
Okay.
followed closely by thinking up a book.
Hmm.
Since my Quillifer books, this has never happened before or since. I live in the country, and there are irrigation ditches in this part of New Mexico to irrigate the fields. And I was walking along the bank of an irrigation ditch, and I had an idea for this book. And it was, I don't know, I was probably walking for an hour and a half. And by the time I got back, I had all 6 books plotted. I had the name of my character. I had the character of my character. And let me tell you, that is a rush. And the problem was it was fantasy, and I was a science fiction author. And if I took time out from my established science fiction career to write 6 fantasy novels, I wouldn't have had a science fiction career by the time that was over, which is why I was glad that my publishers were able to work out this alternate thing where I could stay both in science fiction and begin to explore this fantasy at the same time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
Um, well, I am not a naturally energetic person. I have to make myself get up and do stuff.
Hmm.
And for over 40 years now, I've made myself get up and write every day. Every day that I'm home. If I'm out of town, I don't make myself write. But so that's it's just sort of an element of the discipline of doing this. And I used to write. I began to write because I couldn't help myself. And that's the only reason to write. You know, you don't want to write for money or fame because there are other ways to get that that are a whole lot easier. Uh, and you know, how many rich, famous authors do you know? Probably not very many. Um, so uh, so anyway, I was compelled to write. And then after a couple of decades of that, that compulsion went away.
Hmm.
But yet here I had this career that was fairly successful. And so I had to find new ways of motivating myself every day.
Hmm.
I wasn't just flung by some invisible psychic force in the direction of the keyboard.
Not anymore then, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So
And you're,
that's the current challenge.
huh,
And
okay.
I have to say, you know, the pandemic helped. The pandemic locked me in my house for 3 years, and I wrote 4 books.
Ah, yeah, that's what several other authors were saying
Yeah,
that,
you know,
that you had to.
it'll affect you one way or the other. It'll either make you write books, or will make you not be able to write books. In my
Mhm.
case, I was unable to read. I couldn't focus my mind well enough to read a lengthy piece of fiction,
Hmm.
and that ability is just coming back to me now.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I would like to be able to read my peers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think reading is one of the things that a writer has to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, in order to keep himself fresh,
Hmm.
he's got to find
True.
out what's happening in the field.
Right. So what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process?
Oh, well, I think just avoiding distraction. I'm really good at being distracted.
Okay.
You know, I think, well, you know, I'm typing along and I come to a pause and then I think, oh, maybe I'll see what's happening on Facebook
Hmm.
or
Okay.
see if any email have come in or any. It's and that leads me into, you know, wandering mazes lost. That's you know, always a danger. But because I write to music and the music is streamed, I can't turn off the internet.
Okay. Yep. So what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Um, I think my various research trips. I write
Okay.
about the ocean a lot, and I'm a scuba diver.
Oh,
So I, personally go off and explore the ocean, and then I can write about it. And I've taken various other trips. When I was a historical writer, I wrote um, sea adventure fiction, sort of
right.
in the C.S. Forester vein. And, I was able to travel to the Caribbean on a schooner and sailed around on that for a while. I went to England to look at all of the historical ships there and to do some research at the uh, Royal Greenwich Maritime Museum. And the librarians there were very helpful, by the way. It's since
Mhm.
moved to another part of Greater London, but anyway, that was a really terrific experience to be in this former palace of Queen Anne
Wow.
and these enormous, highly decorated ceilings and so on, and being in the library there and having somebody who was very happy to see me be able to guide me through so I could do my research.
Do you find that because you are an author that you get extra perks?
Oh, I
In other
wish.
words, you don't
No.
have get to places that other people might not get to.
Um, if I know that they're there, I can get to them.
Ah,
But people don't necessarily volunteer to show me their treasures now.
okay. I was just curious because I believe one of the other authors was saying that they got to see places,
Uh-huh.
certain places, which is
Yeah, that's never worked out for me.
okay.
I say, oh no, I take it back. I take it back. A few years ago, the Worldcon was in Dublin,
Hmm.
and my colleague Rick Wilbur, um, who did this for his students every year, put together a tour of Ireland for his friends, and we traveled around on a bus and saw just amazing amounts of stuff. Um, but one of the things I requested, we're going to go right back beside, right near Dunsany Castle. Can we see Dunsany Castle?
Ooh,
Which is, was the home of Mr. Plunkett, Lord Dunsany, a classic
right.
fantasy writer of the early 20th century. And not only, and it's not open to the public normally, but not only did we get to see it, we got a tour by Lady Dunsany herself, the current Lady Dunsany.
Wow, fabulous.
And it was just an astounding place. And Lady Dunsany was just an amazing human being. I should say she's the Dowager Lady Dunsany. But because she's the widow of the previous baron. Um, but it was just an amazing experience because not that much has changed since
Hmm.
Dunsany was writing in there. And
Wow.
his manuscripts are still lying around right where he left them. And he had these amazing um, habit of writing because he was very casual about writing. When he had a special place where he did it, and he sat on a hat and wrote with a quill pen. Uh, because he did. Uh, but at any rate, I saw one of his manuscripts, and he would write on anything. He would write on receipts, on just whatever scrap paper was lying around. And he wrote a story in red crayon.
Hmm.
And then he reused the paper. He wrote another story in green crayon on top of the red crayon.
How could he see it?
And then he wrote a third story in black ink on top of the two stories that had been written in crayon. Presumably, at some point, somebody had to turn out a fair copy, but and apparently he wrote without revision, which is amazing if you ever read Dunsany because his style is very elaborate. But most of his stuff is all first draft. So anyway, that was sort of a special thing that I got to do because of who I am and who my friends are.
Hmm. Wow, that's great. Okay. So, what is the greatest lesson that you have learned thus far in your writing career?
Um, do it to please yourself. Do it
Very
because you can't help yourself. Because you don't know if you're going to please the readers. You don't know if anyone's going to read it. I've had books that were sabotaged by the publisher quite deliberately.
good. Oh.
That I worked on a book called The Rift for a couple of years. It was a Black Lives Matter novel, and I
Mhm.
wrote it in the 90s, a little before that became a topic. Uh, and uh, and the publisher deliberately torpedoed it. Um, I won't go into the story; it's long and depressing. But at any rate, um, can't remember. Well, anyway, so you never know if that's going to happen.
Mm,
I have had,
yeah.
I think, in the 21st century, I've had more of my books have been published poorly or not at all than have been published well.
Mhm.
A lot of them have zero budget for promotion, covers that were jigsawed together by chimpanzees. I don't know. Uh, and just insane stuff. I mean, I had one publisher who had a nervous breakdown and he forgot to send my book to the printer. And I'm sorry for the nervous breakdown, but honest to God, do your job.
So, have your books been changed a lot by editors or
Generally not,
publishers?
no.
Oh, okay. Wow. So, what
It's hard.
piece
It's
of
hard enough to
advice?
get an editor to be interested. I mean, anyhow.
So, what piece of advice would you want to share with others aside from, you know, aside from that?
Okay, well, the first thing I say is write.
Hmm.
Don't just talk about writing. Don't just think about writing. Sit down and write something, and then finish it. And the other thing is network, because this is a fairly large and complicated field, and the more people you know, the more people there are that will help you. People are just enormously helpful in this field. When I wrote my first novel, and um, I showed it to Gordon R. Dixon, who just happened to be passing through New Mexico. And he asked to, I didn't just walk up with a manuscript and lay it on him. I was talking about it and he said it sounded interesting. I didn't like to read it. So then he took it off to the Worldcon in Phoenix. And he was literally walking around the convention trying to hand sell this book to editors.
He was such a great person.
He was just an astoundingly kind human being. And
Yes.
it didn't work. That book never sold, but still, just the
But
thought of
still,
anyone doing that for me still boggles me. And so,
yeah.
to that end, I formed a workshop called Tao's Toolbox, in which I'm trying to pay that forward.
Tell us
And
about that.
so I teach writing for 2 weeks every year in the summer here in New Mexico. I teach with Nancy Kress, who is just an astoundingly good teacher. And there's the Clarion workshop, the various Clarion workshops and Odyssey and so on. I don't know about Odyssey. Clarion is entirely built around short fiction. At Toolbox, we'll look at novels and do
Mhm.
critiques on novels, and we have been pretty successful in that. We've had writers like Fran Wilde and Will McIntosh
Mm.
and Alan Smale, who have all been published very well, and they graduated from this workshop. Um, so bearing in mind Taos Toolbox, it was originally in Taos, New Mexico. It's now in Albuquerque because convenience and forest fires. Um, last year the state was burning down, and I had to move the workshop for fear that it would burn down.
Yeah. Wow. So my next question, you actually answered a little bit of it,
Mhm.
was are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that have helped you in your career?
Well, I did belong to a workshop for many, many years. Um, composed entirely of other authors. It's best to have a little, some kind of qualifications, So in my case, it was all professional writers or graduates of the major workshops. And that sort of raised the level of it. But there are workshops for beginners too, in which you share your work with these other people and hear what they think about it. And my group was pretty top notch. It had George R. Martin. It had Melinda Snodgrass, Victor Milan, Ian Tregillis, quite a number of people who really kept me on my toes. And I sort of had to drop that when I started teaching, because for this workshop I read 500,000 words, and I comment and critique it, and that's enough for 1 year.
Yeah.
I just can't do the workshop and run Tao's Toolbox simultaneously. So.
And right.
And right. Oh yeah, that too.
Little thing like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now I have questions about you as a person. What is one
Okay.
thing, what is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
I know a number of things. I'm trying to think of one that would actually interest anyone. I used to teach small boat sailing.
Oh, small boat sailing?
Yeah. Just little sailboats. I used to teach sailing for the Red Cross.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting.
yeah. And it was in
Okay.
New Mexico, which, is a desert state. But it has lakes, and actually the sailing on them is quite challenging because of the wind conditions around here. Um, if you're sailing on an ocean, chances are the wind doesn't change all that much. It'll be from one direction pretty much all the time. And if it changes, it'll change slowly. But New Mexico, I remember looking out across the lake and knowing that the wind was changing because all the other boats were capsizing as the wind was heading towards me. But yeah, okay, that
Okay.
was an adventure.
Okay. This is a tough one. Okay.
Okay.
What question do you wish interviewers would ask you? And what would your answer be?
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Told you.
Yeah. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I
I
really
told you it
will.
was tough.
Yeah,
Told
right.
you that was tough. Okay. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time to do the things that you love?
Well, I love hanging out with my friends. I love hanging out with my fellow writers because we can share our mutual obsessions. And it's nice. It's nice to be around people who care about the same things I do. Um, I love the ocean. I love water. I scuba dive, as I
Mhm.
think I mentioned.
Mhm.
I am a sixth degree black belt in Kenpo karate, which I've been doing for over 40 years.
Wow.
Um, and that's a passion that's kind of separate from all my other passions. That's one I don't share a lot because I feel like the martial arts are a very private expression of myself, which is weird because I'm doing it in front of classes of people and stuff. But it's not something that um, I'm entirely comfortable talking about.
Hmm. Okay.
And travel. I do a lot of travel. I was on a small boat tour of Greek islands last year,
Hmm.
and it was a small boat. It had like 25, 30 people on it, maybe. And that was pretty wonderful. I saw a lot of stuff that most people don't see. Um, and and this year, we're doing the same thing with Sicily, Malta, and Tangier. We're going to be all in a small boat with an archaeologist, which will be fun, and looking at Greek temples and Norman castles and Spanish churches and the walls of the city of Malta and all of this wonderful stuff. and I'm
I
really
will
looking
bet
forward.
I will bet some of that will wind up in some of your books
Oh,
too.
it definitely will. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the both that and the Greek trip had in common a Mediterranean setting, and that's where the next Quillifer book will take place.
Aha. Okay. So what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're writing or editing?
Um, I write in a semi-reclined position on a lazy boy with my laptop in my lap. Um, and that's the situation where I can keep it up better than the rest. I don't deal with hard chairs anymore, office chairs. Um, and around me, I don't need anything around me, particularly unless there are, stacks of research material that I have to go through.
Like, what about drinks and food? Any
Well,
particular things?
I have, yeah. Well, generally for food, I don't do it at the same time as I write.
Okay.
I have set times for that, although, occasionally I will have a snack. Uh, Drinks, I'm pretty much performing on coffee most of the time. Um, and I can certainly sip coffee and write at the same time. Although I don't because I write late at night. And if I have coffee, I'll, get into a 48-hour cycle without sleep. So,
Hmm.
um,
And you mentioned it before, but when you're writing, you mentioned something about music.
yeah, I
You,
just tend to like to listen to music while I'm working.
what kind of music do you like?
Well, all sorts. Generally, if I'm writing, I don't want music that is going to distract me too much. So I
Hmm.
tend to play music that I'm familiar with, and I'm a rock and roll kid, so there's a lot of that. I listen to a lot of folk. I've recently become a fanatic about Portuguese fado, which is music about fate. That's what fado means, I think. Uh,
Okay.
and it's in a foreign language, so I'm not getting distracted by the lyrics. And it's full of passion and intensity, and I can certainly use a lot of that. So it's pretty awesome.
Well, I was going to
I was
ask
in
you.
Portugal a couple of years ago, and I listened to this stuff live, and I just fell in love with it. I'm not an aficionado. I don't know anything about it. I just know that I love to listen to it.
Oh, so I was going to ask you whether or not you could listen to lyrics, or does it have to be instrumental?
I can listen to lyrics. I prefer to listen to lyrics that I already know pretty well.
Oh,
I
okay.
listen to no new music all the time, but usually not when I'm writing.
That's what I meant when you're writing.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions with
Hmm.
them. Um, and do they, do you have any, and do they help you or hinder you with your work?
Oh, that's hard to say. Currently we have a cat. We keep cats. We're cat people. And in fact, my cat Mocha has been wandering through the office here while we've been having this conversation, and you may have heard her comment here and there. I think she was happy to answer your questions too. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's nice having a little furry piece of, a little furry friend to keep me company. Although I prefer her not to distract me when I'm working.
Yeah,
And
my
because of the way these filters work back here, okay. Um, Sometimes she jumps up on the chair behind me and will pace back and forth, but you won't see her, but you'll see her tail moving around behind my head.
my cat does that too.
Uh, but
And one of the
I am also a dog person, but I travel too much to keep dogs. So
Mhm.
uh, and since we live in the country, we have just all sorts of critters that come and visit us. Got
Ah,
my neighbor's chickens. We've got my neighbor's horses. We've got centipedes. We've got black widow spiders. We've got brown recluse. Um, and these have all, been my companions from time to time.
those last two,
Yeah.
yeah, are not very nice.
Well, the thing about a recluse is it is a recluse. It really doesn't want to bite you.
Yeah,
It wants to hide, but still,
yeah. Still, it's
they
not
they can't give you
comforting.
gangrene. So uh, I generally try to dispose of them whenever possible.
Right. Okay, I just have two more questions for you.
Okay.
One is, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop? And I always have to do a plug for Annie's in all of the
Uh-huh.
videos.
Right.
You can get Walter's books, or the ones that are available.
Uh-huh.
You can get them at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your books?
Okay. Well, a lot of my books went out of print since I have had a 40-year career, and so I have republished them myself. And they are available on all the online forums, Kobo, Amazon, Google, etc. Um, and some are available in print from Amazon and Barnes and Noble, um, the more popular ones, I should say. And yeah, you look around, and I will give you links on my homepage. I have a little thing called ebook store, which will also lead you to any paperbacks and hardbacks that might be out there.
Great. And that was my next question, is how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Okay. Well, I do have a newsletter which you can subscribe to from my webpage, which is walterjohnwilliams.net, and walterjohnwilliams, one word, .net. Um, and on this, I have a blog that, will keep you up to date on whatever's happening in my world, plus anything else I happen to be interested in that day.
Okay. Well, that sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much. That was my last question.
Well, thank
And
you. It's been lovely.
yeah, it has been great. And maybe someday we can see you in our area, if you'd like to travel.
Well, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. If you get to
So
Boston, maybe next year.
maybe next
Um,
year. All right.
yeah.
And thank you for
Well,
the invitation. It's been great fun.
yeah. Well, thank you very much, Walter Jon Williams.
All
We
right.
will be
Thanks.
seeing
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.